All right, medical chemists. So you should be on this sheet either through checking your email or going on to Schoology for what we're doing today. So the first thing is to take notes on metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. So scrolling down to the document, this is our table of contents. Periodic trends notes on page 27 should be new. But essentially, what it is this worksheet that we've been working on for the past couple of days. Right. So, this particular handout, all the color coded information or patterns within the periodic table is your page 27 notes. On page 28, you're going to title it Metals, Nonmetals, and Metalloids. Right. So, for today's notes and lab, our goal is to be able to identify whether an element is a metal, non-metal, or metalloid without using the periodic table, just by completing a series of tests. So currently we've been talking about the body needs 5 common types of ions. Those ions are either K1 or potassium, Na sodium, Ca calcium, Mg magnesium, or Cl chlorine ions. Notice that 4 out of these 5 ions are all on the metal side of the periodic table. Cl is the only nonmetal. So let's say I take a blood sample from you. With that blood sample, we're going to perform 2 tests in order to identify whether the ion is causing our patient issues is a metal or a nonmetal. And then there's going to be one more test to help us identify specifically which ion is causing our patient issues, right? So before we understand or complete this test, we need to understand a couple of characteristics about what ions, not ions, but what metals and nonmetals are and how they behave in order to kind of do the lab and test for ourselves. What type of element are we looking at? Are we looking at a metal, nonmetal, or metalloid? Some of these things might be already familiar to you. So, on this table, on the very top, is how we categorize metals, metalloids, also known as semimetals, and nonmetals. And on the left hand side are different varieties of tests we can use to identify metals, nonmetals, or metalloids. Right? So, first is physical characteristics, or what's the element looks like. Right? So, metals tend to be shiny, and in chemistry, we don't really refer to it as shiny. We would use the term luster. So, the first vocab word is kind of the scientific term, and in parentheses is a common descriptor. Right? Metals also tend to be malleable or bendable, right? And metals also can be ductile, or they can be made into a wire. Nonmetals are the opposite of those things. So no luster or not shiny. They are brittle or break instead of tending to be bendable, and they're not ductile usually. Right? Semimetals or metalloids tend to have characteristics of both metals and nonmetals. Right? And you'll find that throughout this, semi-metals or metalloids kind of like behave like both. So conductivity tests are carrying electricity. Metals can carry electricity. Non-metals cannot. Right? Metalloids or semi-metals, sort of sometimes. Reactivity with acids. Metals tend to react with acids. Non-metals do not. Metals and metalloids, sometimes. You probably might have experienced this if you ever have like jewelry and you go into the shower and it changes colors, or your skin color might change to kind of a greenish or bluish tone, right? And that's because those metals are reacting with the water in your shower that might be slightly acidic, or referred to as hard water, right? Because it has a lot of minerals in there. And then the fourth and final test is to test if it reacts with copper chloride. Basically, when we add copper chloride to metals or nonmetals, it will show up as rust for metals only. So if it reacts, feels like real school. but the bell has not actually rung. Anyways, so here, if it does rust or changes color, it is probably a metal. And then if it does not rust, not a metal. And for metalloids, of course, because they are in between and they behave kind of like both, sometimes, right? So that's pretty much it for your notes. And when you're done, go ahead and watch this video on how to complete your lab if you're feeling kind of stuck or lost.